Penultimacy, a hypothesis of encoded grammar by Alexander St. John. If we considered for a moment the analogy of the Fibonacci ratio or golden mean in the workings of language flux, could we not pinpoint clues as to there being a universality inseparable from human verbal expression, whereby the ream of expression itself be found in the penultimate position in any given statement or question? As with traditional Chinese acupuncture, where the embryo fits exactly the shape of the ear and all the internal organs, what if all units of grammar were found within one utterance, with the vital message embedded at the golden mean? Penultimacy is a word I've coined for such a phenomenon. The idea being that, in English, no matter which wording one offers the receiver in discourse, the message carries equal weight at the penultimate position in a statement or question regardless of syntax, and that the most important message chunk will tend to fall right before the end of an expressed idea, or sentence. If we consider that our anatomical structure characterizes our speech and communications, such that we are never actually out of tune or sync with this natural phenomenon equated with the Fibonacci sequence or golden mean, and insofar as the nature by which all biology develops, so too must language surely follow or reflect such laws. To illustrate this, we can generally divide a sentence into 3 or 4 chunks of information.
I came in for a lot of criticism at the meeting last night.
If we wanted to give more importance to criticism, we might reformulate.
I came in for a lot of criticism at last night's meeting.
If we shorten the sentence to, I came in for a lot of criticism, now the focus seems to be on a lot of. Our skin, the body's largest organ, envelops all other bodily organs. So is there not perhaps an aspect of grammar which encompasses all other units of grammar? Perhaps not an aspect of language that could be seen to overlook all of its parts? An intrinsic pattern whereby a message's integral meaning is conveyed within any given statement in the same position, no matter how you word it? When you juxtapose that with the hierarchical nature of hypotaxis, penultimacy, as I have come to call it, works in a similar fashion only, where one chunk of information at the penultimate position in any given statement or question will either stick out or in some cases get downplayed by what follows it, but nevertheless remains the ream. In the 2 formulations you see here, where the second happens to also illustrate just how flexible English syntax can be, in contrast to how it is generally prescribed, I ask myself, why is it that despite fronting of the object in the second variant, best still stands out as being the ream in both?
I learn a foreign language best where it is spoken. A foreign language one learns best where it is spoken.
In the former, best sticks out, while in the latter it is downplayed by where and spoken. The ream is nevertheless before the very end, since clearly spoken is not the focus. Now, if we convert that into a passive voice, where the agent isn't explicit since it is understood,
A foreign language is best learnt in the country it is spoken in.
best is no longer the focus, but country, as it finds itself in penultimate position. Although we are told that fronting serves to emphasize that which is fronted by the speaker or writer, what seems to be more marking still for the receiver is that which falls in the penultimate position, since the fronted part rather gets quote-unquote buried, since the receiver will often skip over what comes at the very beginning, despite it being a fronted piece of information. What if, regardless of the speaker's choice of syntax, in terms of it being a stylistic choice, for example, whether or not the initial utterance contained a time adjunct, a post-head, complement, etc., and whether or not the speaker had actually consciously chosen any given syntax, the ream, but also, at the same time, a kind of open question be found in a fixed position in the mind of the receiver, at the penultimate position, an embedded meaning at penultimacy, whereby, however stylistically the phrase be formulated, that which becomes most imprinted or registered due to physiological factors on the conscience of the listener were always to be found in the same position of the speaker's statement or question. Bear with me, let's dive deeper. If my premise holds, we can find penultimacy in other areas. In reformulation by way of an embedded clause, putting emphasis on that clause. The guy you spoke to on the phone is my uncle. 3 parts to the sentence. And although the first and last are louder, the ream is the speaker's embedding being on the phone, since the presumed optional extension on the phone is actually what connects the speaker to the receiver. Leaving that part out, the guy you spoke to is my uncle relates to the communication rather than the telecommunication, which serves to justify the receiver's likely ignorance of the relationship between the speaker and the said uncle. Pleonasm, distinct from redundancy, as I mentioned in my essay The English Problem, is the inclusion of words that serve both a rhythmic and functional purpose,
I woke him up.
where up is not actually needed, yet serves to downplay the rime awoke in I woke him. Up shifts the rime to him. The use of a downtoner to mark a lessening effect when in the penultimate position, ultimately intensifying it,
Her heartbeat was slightly erratic.
where slightly is rhythmically and semantically significant because it prepares us for what follows, in this case, erratic. Actually, all so-called adverbs that intensify adjectives have the same effect, since virtually all words that modify another are fronted in English. It's no coincidence, then, that all adjectives are given more volume than the noun following it. An interesting aside, we find another form of penultimacy occurring in tonicity of multisyllable words, whereby the tonic stress occurs on the penultimate syllable in abstract nouns ending in ion and ity, but also an ending in ol and ik. Linguists are certainly aware of the dichotomy of differentiating languages as being either head initial or head final. Even if English is a subject-prominent language, the predicator is neither at the head or end of a statement, but embedded. And so no matter how you choose to transform your sentence, the phenomenon of putting information somewhere other than at the start or end of a sentence seems to make it intrinsically the core of discourse, inasmuch as the topical communication will be embedded for it to cause a sensation or impact on the receiver beyond the speaker's choice of wording. Syntactic alterations and stylistic choices. Let's compare the following two variations of a question, or more precisely, an offer.
Would you like something to drink? Would you like to drink something?
I'm sure you will agree there's a difference. Seemingly inadvertently, what is in the penultimate position seems to be the focus, the rime. In the former, something, and in the latter, to drink, carry more weight. Might not this quote-unquote programmed phenomenon not also explain why certain verbs are made ditransitive in order to shift focus? Consider the following.
John gave Mary $10. John gave $10 to Mary.
It should go without saying that, in the second, the amount of money is the focus, more than Mary, even though Mary falls at the end. One could, of course, argue that the prepositional clause to marry is the focus. However, an English native would likely only use the latter construction in the event there be additional information involved, and even if that information were not verbally iterated. Namely, John gave the $10 note to Mary rather than to James. Where Mary now is more evidently the focus, whether or not rather than to James is verbally stated. That is because contextual matter is always silently heralded. The implicit innuendos are, after all, important. We're told to always read between the lines, and that $10 bill is not entirely forgotten in the context either. In the end, it would seem that a ditransitive construction is in most contexts more effective. He gave Mary $10, and penultimacy would justify that choice of syntax in English. Clefting.
All we're looking to do is to find the cleft here.
In systemic functional grammar, the argument for thematic
Equative.
is that there is exclusivity in the rime. Now, let's take that a step further, or rather, a step back. Saying, what the guests need for breakfast is an omelet, though superficially has the guests in the forefront, clearly we are not distinguishing the guests from, say, the staff. So, either for breakfast or an omelet remains the rime despite clefting. The clefted formulation simply avoids a potentially more complex statement. At breakfast time, the bespoken guests need a meal made of egg to the specification of what an omelet comprises. But my argument is that the desired dish, an omelet, should be served specifically at breakfast time, and not, for instance, that the omelet be the sole dish at that time, because then we might say, what the guests need is an omelet for breakfast. Of course, it is absurd to limit meaning to a set of words and wording alone.
Mind you,
We're told never to assume anything other than what the speaker has stated, and how. This is where penultimacy becomes an important element and distinguishing factor. In the latter case, if omelet is subject to query, Did, like, Manuel the waiter perhaps mistakenly bring something other than an omelet to the guest's table? Besides, it doesn't exclude the possibility that they may desire other dishes at other mealtimes. Rather than clefting, let's try fronting. An omelet is what the guests need for breakfast. Here again, what is fronted, an omelet, is not actually the emphasis. Here, what the guests need is more significant. Basically, with any type of clefting or fronting, where emphasis has supposedly shifted, the focus remains at the penultimate position in a sentence. Moving on, we now need to consider the use of the controversial aspect of the quote-unquote
gerund.
which in itself has to be a breach of traditional grammar, yet perfectly acceptable English.
Learning English is an easy process for some.
Just what exactly is behind that statement? Grammarians would have you believe that learning English is the ream in this statement, for it justifies foregrounding. But could not the focal be for some, if we considered English to be head final or fully end weight? Or then, is it not an easy process if we now consider my premise? Consider.
For some, learning English is an easy process.
Even if for some is used for emphasis, it is a weak argument because it is relative, just as weak as saying, many people believe, or some teachers will say, that English is not as complicated as other languages to learn. All things considered, wouldn't you say that the word English actually stands out more in the latter construction than in the former? Having said that, a stronger argument might be better worded as follows.
Learning English for some is an easy process.
Hey, but does that not support my very argument? Coincidentally, penultimacy does seem to play a role. Let's proof it by shifting the ream to an easy process this time.
Learning English is an easy process for some.
I find this somewhat appropriate, since penultimacy is, in fact, not difficult to grasp. I like to say, learning English is an easy process for those who have come to understand penultimacy. Infants will rapidly pick up a language not just since they will capture language already from within the fetus, but also because they themselves are shaped in the womb in the same fashion as other babies, with ears that pick up surrounding distinctive human accents and tones. Their innate ability to learn faster comes from the fact that they don't analyze or philosophize. They do no doubt catch penultimacy, since it is not so much a linguistic science as it is a biological, measurable, conceivable phenomenon. We might compare it to the shapes formed in the study of cymatics, for instance. What remains to be seen is whether penultimacy and other such aspects of language linked to the natural world will be deemed important enough to be granted official study. But I rest my case with a comparison of linguistics research to many types of alternative therapeutic practices, which get thwarted by mainstream pseudoscience, funded by the pharmaceutical industry. After all, we are kidding ourselves if we think all can be scientifically proven. Nevertheless, we have witnessed accounts of seemingly unexplainable healings, full recovery from otherwise terminal illnesses, not to mention near-death experiences. Philosophical debates aside, human language merely reflects the universal shape of all animate life forms and an innate urge for humanity collectively to glorify life itself, to shape and to reshape it. As such, might the power of discourse itself be pre-encoded into our very own human fabric?